This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. This week, I'm joined by writer and nature-based therapist, Brigit Anna McNeill, for a reflective conversation about finding our way back to the natural world. Drawing on her book and her own journey, Brigit shares how her grandmother's plants, herbalism, and old folklore helped her heal, reconnect with her body, and rediscover a sense of belonging in nature. We talk about losing and reclaiming that connection, the quiet power of slow change, and why nature doesn't demand anything from us, only that we're willing to listen.
Well, as I mentioned this in the book a bit about my grandmothers and how when I was a child, they really gave me safe spaces in the world. And they were both quite inspiring people, and they were both very connected to the plant world and to the natural world in very different ways. One really taught me about growing and having faith in the soil and seeds, and even though we don't know our tomorrows, about still planting and having faith and hope in what we are creating, and that when we work with the earth, we are kind of nourished in return. And my other granny was just wild and eccentric and at home within the forests. So it was later in my life, when I had moved really far away from any of that, that I was really struggling. And when I looked back at what might help me, I remembered them and the sort of their earthy hands and their gardens and the forest, and started following that and looking for teachers. And I ended up studying art psychotherapy, and noticed how much better it was doing art therapy outside with people, and how much better I felt too. And that familiarity with wanting to partner with nature to feel better was something that I really recognized from childhood. And so I just started following that in my work, but also definitely for myself, much more for myself than anything. Which led me to, write this book in the end, this sort of gathering of stories and realizations and journeys.
I've been reading a book called Reconnection, and he bases it on a lot on research that's been done. And he talks about this disconnect when you get to your kind of teenage years, how you just pull away from nature. And it is honestly a tale as old as time. It seems to be just a recurring theme that I cannot ignore when I speak to people for the podcast anyway, that they they kind of don't connect with nature necessarily all throughout their lives, but then they find it again when they're ready or when they need to. But there is definitely this period for a lot of people where they go through physical and mental changes, and they do have that disconnect from nature. And I'm not saying it's everyone, but I think particularly if maybe you were brought up in a city, it just doesn't factor into your life, and then it kind of comes pinging back. And I don't know whether that's a necessary process or it's just something about the way we're living that makes that happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there is definitely, it feels like there's absolutely a teenage moment, or many, many years, where you are absolutely meant to move away from everything you know, or everything your parents are sort of teaching, or your culture. There's something about teenage energy that is about disruption and opening things up and searching for the truth. And I don't know, but it feels like our culture perhaps is so, especially in teenagehood, nature just isn't a part. And I don't know if it's a turning away from nature as a natural thing as a teenager, or just that that's what our culture kind of does more, if that makes sense.
So where do you find yourself now, aside from writing?
Well, aside from writing, I was teaching nature-based therapy courses and retreats as well, and sort of writing, not just books, but other kind of writing work. And I recently moved into a cottage in the forest in Dartmoor, which is just really gorgeous to be held in that. And I always wanted to to live in a cottage in the forest. So that feels really gorgeous as well.
I bet it does, yes. When I was reading that, I thought, "Oh my god, that's just my dream." And I'm sure
Yeah.
many people listening would say the same. But it's interesting you talk about your grandmothers, and I'd love to have grandmothers like that. And I'm not in any way denigrating mine because they are also awesome, but yours just
Yeah.
so connected. And there was this bit in your book where you're talking about how there's kind of wisdom woven into older stories. And I thought I might just ask you to touch on that. And I think the thing that you mentioned in the book is about not burning elderwood. But, there are all these kind
Mm,
of folkloric things that pass down through generations, and we take them on face value as stories. But actually, there's a lot
yeah.
of wisdom woven into them, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And I remember one of my grannies had a book in her downstairs toilet that was, what was it called? Grandmother's Wisdom, or Grandmother's like Old Wives' Tales or something. And it was lots of stories about nature, but I feel like we've learned to see them as nonsense, as old wives' tales, or they're not true. But actually, lots of them hold lots of truth, but they're just told in strange ways. And I really love the old wisdom of the land, and it sort of teaches us how people used to interact with the land. And it didn't seem like people said things straight. It came with sort of funny metaphors or symbolism. And I think now we take those things too literally. Some people, many people I've met, feel like if you touch a dandelion, you'll wet yourself. And yeah, that's the old story. But the reality is they're a diuretic that helps shift waste through urination, but they won't make you wet yourself. But these stories are quite extreme, and then it can lead to people thinking that they're just a load of nonsense. But you have to sort of take them with a pinch of salt and not take them so literally and see the wisdom behind it. And I think there's something we're missing, which are those beautiful old stories handed down from older folk. And that seems to be a big part of what's missing in our culture, sort of that space to hand down those stories and to listen to them and learn from them.
And the other thing that you write about in the book, which again, I was kind of reading it, and I think bouncing the idea around in the back of my mind was the one, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So, although you
Mm,
can be surrounded by nature, and even if you're told, this is something we should engage with, we should be paying
yeah,
attention to that. When you're making that transformation from a kind of previous self almost, you have to be ready to listen and absorb the
yeah.
message, don't you? It's no good just plonking
Oh,
someone in a
yeah.
field and saying, "This is good for you, get on with it." You've got to be ready, haven't you?
You do, you do. And it's sort of the right story at the right time that will suddenly embed in you, or the way someone says something. But it always comes down to, in the end, it has to be your own choice. Because I always remember when someone once said to me, I've got good news for you and bad news for you. The bad news is it's down to you. And the good news is it's down to you. And I remember feeling quite a lot of relief in that, because I always felt like I had to wait for someone to save me or to change my life for me. And the realization is that that person was me. And also, there was nothing that was going to happen until I chose to do it or I was ready. And I think it's one of the things I've realized in a lot of the work I do is that, yeah, you can't force someone's readiness. That's not something that's down to someone else. You can give them seeds, you can give them stories, you can give them all sorts of things and try and rewild the stories they hold. But really, it's down to them and their readiness and what they will receive.
I think my take on that, and that's another thing I've thought about over the years, is that it's both empowering to realise that and quite
Yeah.
terrifying at the same time. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you're on your own. It doesn't mean that it's just this lonely world where everything is down to you, because you'll find support in nature, in others, in all sorts of places. But in the end, you can make the choice to do something differently.
Yeah, and I think perhaps some people think that it's gonna be this light bulb moment or this flash of lightning, and you'll have this transformation of
Yeah.
consciousness, and you'll be like, "Yes, I'm ready to receive
Yeah.
messages." But sometimes it's a slow burn, and you actually have to work at it,
Yeah.
don't you?
Oh my God, absolutely. And also sometimes you don't really realize it's happening, and then you find yourself in a similar situation and you respond differently, or you realize how different you were from the last time you were in that situation. or you look back and you think, oh my goodness, I'm so different to what I was a year ago or 5 years ago. Sometimes the journey is so slow. And I think often people also think that the journey is this lovely upward hill to the light. And it just isn't. It's up and down and cyclical and dark and rooty and decaying and light and beauty and blossoming all at once. And these things, I think it is like seeds, these moments of realizations just can be really small things that just sort of embed somehow and slowly, slowly work through us.
Sometimes you can be caught up in hearing about other people's journeys, and then there's that,
Mm.
problem of comparing yourself, and if you're
Yeah.
not getting that connection immediately or in that you
Yeah.
think is right, then you think you've failed, but it's just that you keep chipping away, I suppose.
Yeah. Totally.
So what I was gonna ask you as well about herbalism, which obviously touch on it in the book, but it's not an
Yeah.
instruction manual by any stretch. It's
No.
describing your journey with it. And I wondered how you feel that herbalism connects you with the natural world, because I think for you, I'm right in saying that it's shifted both physical and sort of spiritual outlook. Is that fair to—
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely the plants for me that really, really shifted something, and so many different ways. Like, for a start, like the physical, like you say, I think I was in a place where people felt very unsafe, and I was able to work with plants in a way I don't think I could have received from a person or other people. And that was through slowly working with plants and through the way I was being taught, allowing or acknowledging how the plant brings my awareness to different parts of my body. So for myself, I was completely concreted over. I was not in touch with my body at all. And I was being taught to do simples, which is one plant at a time and over a month, 3 months, a year, and just really feeling what that plant does inside my body. So a plant that might work with my heart would bring my awareness over and over again to that part of my heart because the plant was working with it. Or a plant that works with the nervous system, I'd get to know my nervous system more, or the plant that worked with my gut or my liver. And so it was this sort of journey of coming down and inwards into my body, into a place that I hadn't dared explore for years. And another teacher I had, we spent a good couple of years working with sensory perception and the question, how does it make you feel? So smelling the plant, tasting the plant, eating the plant, and getting a sense of how it felt in my body. What did it ignite in the smell? What feeling, emotion did it ignite? And asking that question, how does this make you feel? It sounds so small, but it was so, so huge in what that did for me. It was a question I hadn't asked myself for most of my life or been asked how it makes you feel. I think I had had the opposite. I had not wanted to know how things make me feel. And I had experienced many times of being told not to express how things make me feel. So it was going in the opposite direction to what I had known was safe. I was doing something different, and that was sort of terrifying. And yet it helped me to be in touch with that sort of inner compass of feeling and how I perceive the world and how my sensory perception perceives the world and how things make me feel. And through working with the plants was a way in which I could do that where I don't think I could have with a person. And so plants became really kind and a sort of place that I could explore that wasn't asking anything of me in return. And when I first experienced a plant help me, which was nettle, I was sort of blown away by how something I'd learned as a weed had just allied with me on a path of wellness or better wellness. And that made me very hungry to discover what else was there. And as I started to learn about each different plant, it created a world that was far friendlier than I had been learned to believe. I think when we have the stories of weeds in need of taming and the soil is dirt and insects are out to get you, it creates these sort of micro stories of danger, and it's harder to connect with nature. But what I was doing, or through the teachings I was receiving, it was undoing those stories and learning over and over that there was friendship and care out there. And then through the plants and their medicine, I also started to explore the stories of the soil or the worm or the bird song, because each one was creating a better picture of a really beautiful and friendly world for me.
It really struck me reading the book. I said before we started recording that a lot of it in the book resonated with me,
Mm.
but I found myself reading it and thinking, I could never ever connect the dots on the level that you have. And I was going to ask you the question actually, because you've got this deep kind of knowledge of biological processes and how it does all fit together. Did you do a lot of research for the book, or were they things that you learned through your teachings?
They were mainly things I knew already through this fascination with wanting to unearth stories. I follow a thread of something. I think partly it's about, for me, sort of re-revealing what I felt as a child in nature. And it sort of proves to me those feelings of, when you feel safe in a forest, but you just think, oh, I don't know why, maybe it's my imagination. And then if you look into it, you realize that the bacteria in the soil that you're sitting on is helping create more serotonin in the body, or the oils coming from the trees are helping your parasympathetic nervous system be aligned, or the bird song, is settling the nervous system. So those stories were really addictive to me. And there's something about science that, although in school I often experienced science as very dry and very tight, and it sort of took the soul away from things, there are also incredible people who, like Robin Wall Kimmerer or Brian Cox, who sort of make science poetry again and almost prove the ensouled quality of the earth. There were a few things I think I discovered along the way with the book, definitely from writing about them. It's like, oh, I must check this, or I must remember this because I learned this so long ago, or something like that. So there was more beautiful stories that appeared because of writing the book, or I got to know those stories in more detail. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fantastic reading it. It's like, wow, just that deep thinking is very, very attractive, and I really appreciated it.
Oh, thank
No,
you.
not at all. And one of the things that I really loved, and it might sound very obvious, but when I read it, I just went, "Oh God, yeah, that's so, that's so true." And that was when you said that there is no human atom. We're made of
Oh,
the same
yeah.
stuff as nature is, and I thought, yeah, that's such a good point, isn't it?
Yeah, it really helped me to realize how much we are nature, and that there isn't some extra special material that we're made of. Yeah, and there isn't human atoms, it's just nature's atoms, and we're all made from them. And because the reason that helped me is it meant that the processes I witnessed in nature, the will to thrive, the will to grow, the will to blossom, to bring your medicine to the earth, the will, or also the seasons, the need to decay and to rot and to change and to rest. Knowing that I was part of nature helped me to see those processes as my processes as well.
Yeah, and that again, you talk about in the book when you kind of compare us to plants, which again is a fantastic piece of writing. But I think the essence behind it is that if we lived like plants and lived without that fear of judgment or fear and just expressed ourselves kind of how we naturally feel inclined to do, we would maybe all be a lot happier. I mean, can you kind of dig into that a little bit, that thought process?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was that ignited that thought, I think I am aware through my own life and through working with other people that fear of being who we are in the world, being in our integrity, and through working with nature, I just see how everything, moves towards its true shape. And it feels unnatural to me, this sense of self-hate or self-sabotage, because it feels natural with the stories or the experiences we've had to be that way. But in the wilder world, it doesn't feel like a natural way of being. And I was wondering, what would happen if the apple tree refused to grow apples because they had grown to think they should look more like a pear, or what would happen if the rose didn't bloom because they grew to be self-conscious of their smell, or if the bees didn't follow the vibration of pollen because they had learned that their inner knowing was defunct. We would die. The world would become grey and miserable and stop. And yet it's what we do all the time, to ourselves and to others perhaps. But it feels like watching nature in that way has helped me to try to live a more authentic life, or to support myself to grow and become more.
Do you think that if you were wanting to embark on that journey, that you did live more true to yourself and without
Yeah.
limitations? Do you kind of need to totally disengage from the self or the circumstances that hold you back? Or again, can that be a gradual kind of process?
Oh, I don't know. It's probably so individual, isn't it?
Mm.
I think it absolutely can be a gradual process. I feel like all too often, like you were saying about this sudden flash of brilliance that changes us, I think we can often, as people, think there needs to be this push or this shove or these big moments or this breaking. And actually, I feel some of the most powerful journeys are the ones that go slowly and one step at a time and one breath at a time. Because I think it's a big thing to try and work out even what is right for us, and to keep questioning that and keep feeling inside. And it's a complicated thing because there are so many things that come up in the world that ask us to shift from our integrity quite often. And yeah, it takes strength to try and remain in our integrity as much as possible. And we need to give ourselves some softness around it, I believe. Yeah.
And I'm going to finish by asking you, because a lot of people who listen are probably busy and, and making that time to even try and do something. Although a lot of people listening, admittedly, are already connected to the natural world and are
Yeah.
probably doing a lot of things in their own way. But if for anyone who might be looking to just connect in a bit more, especially at this time of year, is there one thing you would say, put aside 5-10 minutes and just try this and see how you get on with it?
With connecting to the natural world,
Mm.
I think just being out there, just looking, just listening, just being open to receiving, even just for 5 minutes, even if you're in a city, and you're just looking at the clouds or something like that, I think can be a really simple but really powerful thing. Not really even to go out there with some idea that something's going to happen or something's going to change, but just completely open to whatever comes, to receiving whatever comes from what it is you're looking at or being with in nature.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Brigit about her mindful journey back into relationship with nature. If this episode resonated with you, you might also enjoy episode 348, A Forest Fix, and episode 340, The Nature of Resilience. You'll find links to those in the show notes, and thank you as always for listening. Next up is Benny with his insect of the week. But first, a quick word from this episode's sponsor, Care Doers Herbs, a small Welsh Celtic herbal business creating sustainably sourced dried herbs and botanical blends, designed to help you feel more grounded and connected with the plant world.
To the healers, dreamers, and keepers of the old ways, listening to Bud of the Week. Hello from the heart of Wales. Here at Cerddoriaeth Herbs, we carefully craft our herbal blends and pouches. Every herb is sourced in the UK, then handcrafted into 100% natural products, wrapped in fully recyclable and biodegradable packaging. We care for the planet as it cares for us. Inspired by an ancient wisdom for the wanderers and dreamers of today, we invite you to slow down and sit with our Pacifica blend and connect with a simpler, more enchanted way of living. Begin your journey at Cerddoriaeth Herbs and use the code BUDPODS for a special discount at checkout.
If you can, do check out the website and support them. It's one small way to bring a bit more of the natural world into your day, something Brigit talks so beautifully about in this episode. Thank you again for listening. Here's Benny.
The Australian orange-tip moth, scientific name, Tachystola acrosantha. In the last few months in the Eden Nature Garden in London, I've recorded 2 new species of moth for our garden species list. Both of these moth species have been Australian species. This has led me down an interesting route of research into seeing what these moths are about and why they might be here. The Australian orange-tip moth, which is not to be confused with our native orange-tip butterfly, arrived into Devon in 1908 with imported plants, it said. Curiously, its larvae don't just reside in leaf litter, it feeds on leaf litter, so fallen leaves and dried leaves. And even more interesting is that it seems to have a fairly close association with eucalyptus leaves. Now, I don't know many species in the UK or in Europe that rely or can utilize eucalyptus leaves, so there may be a very interesting ecological upside with these species being present. There is a second species of Tachystola moth in the UK now as well. In the last few years, Tachystola mulligani has been described by a lady in West London who found the moth and wasn't sure what it was, linked up with the Natural History Museum, and they had it there, sat there as an undescribed species from 150 years ago from Australia, once again. So it was even undescribed in Western Australia where it's from. So that's the second species of Tachystola in the UK. The etymology is quite interesting. It's a mixture of Greek and Latin. So tachy means swift or rapid. Stola means robe or outfit in Latin. And then acro is the ancient Greek for extreme end or tip. And xantha means yellow or golden in Greek. So acroxantha is the more usable bit, the epithet describing the tip of it as golden or yellow, which does fit with its appearance. It's quite a striking little moth, but it's not large. It's 13 to 15 millimeters wingspan, so it could be overlooked. I kind of spotted it and I just took some pictures. I'm not an amazing mother, so I took some decent macro shots of it and then I got some help identifying it. I'm lucky to have some really great friends who know a lot more about moths than I, but you can also ask for expert help online if you do find moths that you're unsure about. I always recommend taking the best photographs you can, or if you can carefully put it in a pot and get someone to have a look at it for you. That's another really good way. Once again, just a reminder to any species you come across to record them on the apps, whether they're common or not, and you never know what might turn up. I want to leave with a quote that our incredible entomologist friend, Dr. James McGill, said, and it may be quite apt for this particular species. He said, "If you move plants across the world, you get the invertebrates you deserve." So I'll leave you with that one to think about.
You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.